Today, I'm really excited to have Karapet Gyumjibashyan on the podcast. Karapet is the Senior Director of Product Management at Krisp, a renowned application that eliminates background noises and echoes from your online calls in real time. Prior to Krisp, Karapet worked at several other companies as a manager and as an engineer before he decided to head into the role of startups and work at Krisp. Karapet is also a fellow content creator on LinkedIn, so please feel free to go check that out. It was really great having Karapet on the podcast because Krisp is an application that I use every day with my calls and on Discord. And so it's really great to get to know his philosophy about product management and how the product went from where it was in an initial stage to the massive behemoth that is today. So with that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, Karapet, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi. I'm glad to
Yeah,
be here.
yeah, super excited to have you on. So, before we get started, I always love to ask the simple question, but what brought you to the world of product management? What led you here?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I coming from an engineering background. Back in the day, I was designing microelectronic chips, memory circuits and stuff like that. But then I kind of discovered for myself that uh, I love technology and I love engineering, but that's not the only thing I'm excited about or interested in, right? I'm also interested in business and design. So what I discovered is that this narrow uh, chip design engineer sort of title was a little bit too narrow for my interest. I was interested in more things, so that's where you kind of naturally gravitate towards product management because of how wide of a scope it covers and how many things you have a chance to dive into and explore. So, and then I had a chance to work with an amazing person from whom I learned a lot, like Amur Avakian, who was he had experience at Google and then at Expedia and and I worked with him at Ginosi, and he co-founded Ginosi. This is a hotel automation platform, and I learned a lot from him. Kind of, he brought me to the world of product management. Kind of helped to think like a product manager in terms of value and how to make the value, how to present it, and how to make it work. And yeah, kind of that's my journey. And afterwards, when I discovered Krisp, I was very excited because that was it was back in 2019, and back in the day, the AI it was the first hype wave of AI, let's call it this way.
Right.
And every startup that would integrate some sort of I don't know, Amazon transcription API, let's say, would call themselves AI startup. And I was a bit cynical about this AI thing before I learned about Crisp and the technology. And I thought that this is the first, real world use of AI that is quite fascinating. And I could see a lot of use cases for it. So um, I was very excited about it, and that's when I joined Crisp, where I am.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, diving into what you were saying before then about first getting into product management, I feel like that's a very similar story to even to me, right? So I started off as a software engineer. As time went on, I enjoyed coding. I love engineering, but I wanted to be part of those business discussions and those design discussions and the value to the customer. And that's why I naturally gravitated towards product management. It wasn't necessarily because of a hatred or some type of dislike towards engineering. It's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
wanting to have multiple facets under your control and being able to contribute to them. So definitely, I definitely resonate with your story there. And then the second point you mentioned there, like the mentorship part is huge. And that's something as a young product manager I've been trying to get from across the industry, from people like yourself and other product managers leading, just trying to get that mentorship and trying to understand the best techniques I can employ as a product manager, so I can grow my arsenal of tools. And the third point you mentioned there about AI is so interesting because I feel like even today, you mentioned that hype cycle in 2019 and how there's a lot of, for lack of a better way of saying it, a lot of BS AI products that aren't actually AI products. I feel
Mm.
like even today, with GPT-3, we'll see a lot of products that are just wrappers around GPT-3, and they claim
Yeah.
themselves as AI, but they're not actually contributing like to the AI, right? They're just doing a wrapper on something that's already been built. So super interesting to hear those different thoughts, and definitely like Krisp is one of those companies that's really actually diving into AI and trying to solve a problem here.
Yeah, yeah, we're very passionate about AI and science in general. And like, if you look at companies of our side of our size or our stage, we have a disproportionately big AI research group, and that's
Right.
something that we're quite proud of. And we think of it as an advantage because we can bake this cool AI technologies in house, and we believe this gives us an edge.
For sure, for sure. So you mentioned what attracted you to Crisp. So I'll ask you this: like, what's made you stick around at Crisp? Because of course, somebody of your caliber has so many different opportunities out there to contribute. So what has made you stick around with the team and the company of Crisp?
Um, yeah, I think the interesting part about that is like, I it, it's about how your job changes, right? The titles might stay the same, but the content of what you do changes in such big range that you kind of have to, every time you have to reinvent yourself. So maybe I stick, you say that I sticked around at Crisp. Yeah, but the content of what I was doing during these several years was very, very different. So from the skills perspective or career perspective, or what I've seen, it's been quite a ride and a growth story. So when you're a part of a growing company and a growing product, you have to kind of keep up with the growth, and you have to always reposition yourselves to the best way to solve these new problems that are thrown at you. And especially in case of Crisp, um, we launched in 2019, and then in 2020 the pandemic happened, and
Right,
suddenly it turned out that everybody's having calls from home, and home is not that friendly a place for having calls, right?
right,
There are dogs barking, children crying, etc. So and we've been humbled with the opportunity to help so many people to be and stay professional in those crazy times. So it's been a story of growth, and my job at first, from the initial part when I was the first PM of a startup with a task of figuring out the PMF and finding these points where we fit with the market. That's where it became a growth story. Like, how do you figure out growth, and how do you manage to scale so fast in such a new reality and a new market? And this kind of reinvention of the job kind of continues till now, and that's what excites me and keeps me at the company. And also the culture and the leadership are quite uh, adequate and are listening. So that's also something, the feeling that you're feeling heard, especially, and it's especially important for somebody in product, right?
hmm
Because the product by definition is uh, working cross functionally and across the different organizations, so it's important to be heard, and I feel like I'm heard. So that's also a great motivator to stick around.
right, right. That makes a lot of sense, and I think I think the three biggest reasons I've seen people leave is a, they don't feel like there's as much learning opportunity, growth opportunities inside the company anymore. B, they don't agree with leadership, or see that they just get another opportunity. And of course, the third one you can't do much about, but the first two especially, it seems like Krisp is right on the nose there, where you're getting that growth opportunity inside the company, you're getting to optimize for your learning and leadership, and you are on the same page, which is always great. So that's really great to hear, and it's good to hear that Krisp is chugging along. um, but cool, let's get into the product. So let's get into the product at Krisp, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers probably know what Krisp is, but in case they don't, Krisp is an AI powered noise canceling application that removes background noise from online calls in real time. And my own personal story with Krisp is I had this exact same problem a couple years ago where I wanted to, I had to take calls on the go. Or at home, there's a lot of, my mom was cooking in the kitchen, or my dad's watching TV, and that's not very great for taking video calls. So I searched for a solution. I became familiar with Krisp, and voila, I turned Krisp on, and it worked. And it's one of those magical moments, I think, as a product manager you really aspire for. That magical moment where the customer takes your product, and in that instant they realize how much value has been added to their life. So I felt that, and that's why I got super excited about Krisp. And alongside the Mac alone, the standalone Mac app, Krisp is also integrated within Discord. And for my own personal use case, I use that a lot as well. So if you are on Discord and you take calls on Discord, more likely than not, you are already using Krisp technology there. So super exciting. And when we talk about Krisp, in my opinion, Krisp seems to have the best noise cancellation in the industry. So my first question to you was, what do you think Krisp did so well to let it shine against other incumbents in the space and to really define itself as the best noise canceling in the industry?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for this good feedback. It's always exciting and cool to hear that. In order to understand this, we have to think in terms of context, right? When you were describing Krisp, you used the word magical, and that's really most of the users how they describe Krisp, right? And what is magic? Like if you think about what is the experience that we call magical, it's the it's the unexpected easiness, right? Or something that is beyond your expectation. There is some level of expectation that you have around technology, about noise cancellation, or other things that are around there. And if there is something that is so much better than your expectations, then wow, this is you call it magic, right? And in terms of the technology and the quality of technology, Chris was able to kind of surpass and exceed expectations of users, and I believe that was one of the key areas what made the technologies and the product so special, because nobody expected that such a thing is possible.
Hmm. And
Uh, yeah.
and I guess like as a quick like trying to dive a little bit deeper into that, do you think it has something to do with Chris specifically focusing on one use case while other companies were maybe focusing on multiple use cases, or what do you think set them apart so well?
Yeah, well, that's actually very, very, very good question. So, the point with noise cancellation is that it's so wide, right? Like you can apply. It's very horizontal use case. You can think of it about like every possible call or every possible context. It starts from any call center call needs to be without noise. Every sales call, online, I don't know, interview, webinar, game chats, or what have you, right? So the range is quite big. And initially, even we weren't sure during this search for PMF or finding the right market where we would want to focus on. Even we weren't sure what would be the right fit. We would want like it can be used by anybody, right? But then as we learned more and understood the market and understood the users and understood where we could add the most value, it seemed to make more sense to focus on the professional use case, these prosumers that are using Zoom, Teams, and apps like that for business communication, because we think it's a good ground and we saw a lot of traction and excitement in this market. By the way, the first version of Crisp's website was black because we were thinking more about this gaming market, and the gaming websites that tend to be in darker colors, right? But once we clarified the strategy and we understood that no, we want to focus on these professional use cases and where the voice matters and the professionalism matters, and when we remove noise, we add professionalism, right, to the call.
Right.
That's where we change the colors. Now our website is lighter and more according to the expectations in the prosumer market.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think it's a credit to your product team where you guys are thinking to that level as well, because every part of the process of the flow makes such a big difference to the customer. Not only the app as well, but when you get to the website of the application, like you mentioned, gaming websites might have more dark and more vibrant colors like reds and stuff like that thrown in there, while professional websites will have more whites and and
Oh
it'll be
yeah,
more like that.
there is a huge, I don't know how to call it, maybe abyss between an idea or even a technology that works in a lab and the product that you can sell on a market, right? And there is, and that's the key, like the skill, if you will, for the product team to figure out how to bridge this gap in the right way and make the right choices to
Right.
package the product well and make it work in all these different environments with all the edge cases, etc.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. And I think what's really interesting what you mentioned there is that you guys shifted from more of a gaming focused product to a more professional focus. And I feel like, uh, but I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here. One of the ways you guys decided to address the gaming market was through your partnerships, through companies that were already pretty prevalent there. And of course, Discord is one of the biggest ones, the biggest one I know. But I know that you guys also recently partnered with Twilio Video for their use case, and you have other partnerships across the industry. So it
Yeah.
seems like partnerships are pretty essential when it comes to a
Mhm.
platform like Krisp. And so, first off, I'd love to know sort of the team's thought process behind making these partnerships with the companies. And
Yeah.
then from there, when it comes to product development, how do you think about making the product so it easily integrates with these third-party solutions?
Yeah. So, that comes from the understanding that noise is a kind of fundamental problem. Like it can apply to everything, right? But we also, that's one perspective. And the other perspective is that as a startup company, you need to be laser focused on doing some one thing and doing that one thing extremely well, right? So although we realized that there is this plethora of use cases that we could potentially cover, we needed to make the strategic choices about which ones we're focusing on. So that's how we came up with this, with our focus on the prosumer market and the call centers, because we discovered that, especially in call centers, the quality of voice and the professionalism and the absence of noise are extremely important and valuable and something that is directly connected to the ROI.
Mhm.
And so Chris made a very natural sense and natural fit there. But the question is, what about other use cases, right? There are many of those, and the way we think about other supporting other use cases is through this partnership. We also have this technology licensing program. Where we sell the SDK and like the technology itself. So if you're a developer doing some developing an app in an other use case, right,
Right.
that where we're not focusing on, you can we can partner together and you can get the SDK integrated into your own application, like communication application or what have you, and have the best in class noise cancellation integrated. And that's kind of how we increase the reach, increase the addressable market of the technology without going into and doing all the heavy work of addressing those different specific use cases. In
Right.
case of Discord, this was a very cool partnership that we're very happy and proud of. Uh, and we thought the thinking is this, like we're not focusing on games, right? We're focusing on professionals. But how do these professionals discover that there such a solution exists in a market, right? Well, when does professionals after a busy work day come back home and want to relax a little bit? They maybe uh, go and do some gaming and use
Right.
Discord. So we thought that it would be a nice place and an effective way to raise awareness about our solution. So if they and a built-in demo, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So once they discovered the magic of Krisp, then they can go and use Krisp in their professional applications and in their companies with Zoom teams, etc. So
Right.
it's a natural, like this good SDK partnership with Discord, and also an awareness component to help our core app business.
Yeah, no, that's such a unique acquisition funnel you mentioned there. And now that you're talking about it, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That a lot of the pro users, including myself, like doing some gaming on the side after a long week, and and that use case of isolating voices isn't only in gaming, but it's in professional circumstances as well. So you could obviously, if you see the value from the gaming point of view, you can translate that to your professional point of view too, and that makes a lot of sense. And
Exactly.
it's such a unique funnel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, that's so interesting, and yeah, I think that especially that partnership with Discord, for me at least, based on what I've seen, has been such a valuable thing for your team because everybody I've talked to, even like personal friends or people in the industry, I feel like that is like 9 times out of 10 the biggest way they found Crisp,
Yeah.
and such a big part of your growth today. So that definitely paid off a lot. And
Mhm.
and yeah, perfect. Well, Krisp also recently added a new technology that not only replaces background noise, but also replaces background voices now, which is so unique. Because I the one case where Chris couldn't help me in the past was if my mom's cooking, my dad's watching TV, that's okay. But if they yell at if they say something to me while I'm recording a podcast like this, it's gonna come on the podcast.
Yeah.
So definitely that's such a great feature for me to have. And so I was just wondering, like what technological evolution and change in approach allowed Krisp to add such a feature, because it is a very unique feature that I haven't seen in many other platforms, if any, other than Krisp.
Yeah. Well, it's again about thinking. So there are a lot of noise cancellation solution that popped out after Crisp. Some are built in with this calling platform. Some are not. Right. Some there are kind of copycats of Crisp, if you will.
Hmm.
And all of them, basically, the AI, the neural network that's inside of them, it's kind of trained in a somewhat similar way. You take a lot of human voices. I'm just simplifying it, but the core of
Yep.
it is this: you take a lot of human voices, and then you take a lot of non-human voices, everything else, and then you teach the network to separate between the two, and you tell it, hey, keep the human voices and remove everything else. If something is not human voice, whatever it is, then you remove it. It's a noise, right?
Hmm.
And this approach works well with all these types of, I don't know, barking dogs and sirens and construction noise, etc. But it doesn't. But it where it fails is with human voice, where the noise is the human voice itself, when
Yep. Yep.
somebody is talking in the background. So because this technology is not trained in a way to separate between the human voices, so as to know that this human voice is important, I need to keep it, and this one is not. That's where it fails. And when we thought about like what would be the natural evolution of our technology, that's where it goes, right? To be so exact and so good that we not only separate the noises, but we also are able to separate the voices. And this is a particularly important and valuable use case for several occasions. So for work from home, there is the thing that you've mentioned, or like some partners are having different calls from the same room, right? So
Right. Yeah.
something like that. Um, and after the pandemic, the other use case that we see is that after the pandemic, people went back to offices, right? This open office setup, and what they discovered that changed is that now there are a lot more calls that are happening because of the hybrid setup. Some people are in the office and some are not. So even if it's a 10-person meeting, but one of them is not in the office, then boom, it's a virtual meeting, right, on Zoom. And so we had a lot of, and so there are not many meeting rooms available, which result in many people having different calls from the open office space. And there you have it, a lot of voices that conflict with each other and create these noisy situations. And of course, there is the call center use case as well when there are many people talking. And obviously, the type of noise that you have is the human noise and the voices. So that's where we tasked our um team to like think about how to solve it. And from the technical and the difficulty perspective, it's maybe, I don't know, like 10 times more difficult technological task, right, to be able to separate the voices from each other rather than voices from noises. And yeah, kudos to our team that was able to solve it. Now
Yeah.
we've brought it to market. We see uh, good adoption on this feature, and we think that now that the market is more crowded with competing solutions, this is something that differentiates as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's especially very impressive because like you mentioned there, when you have general noises like barking dogs or pots clanging, that's easy to train on because that's a general training set.
Yeah,
But specifically for my voice, for example, you have a specialized training set that you have to train the model on. And I like that's a much harder problem because you don't have the range of data that you do for for a general
yeah,
training set. So that's very big kudos to the AI team at Krisp because that's a very hard problem to solve.
yeah.
And yeah, like you mentioned
And
there, I
not
think.
only the AI team, that in order to bring this tech to the market, there were a lot of, it's not the AI surely brought the tech, but there is a lot of product mechanics, like product engineering, that needs to be done so that it integrates in the product
Mhm.
well, because that's not trivial because of the specifics of the technology. And there is also some considerable work to do on the design side to in order to communicate how the technology works so
Yeah,
that people would understand, right? Because this is not some kind of tech that you're used to seeing in other products, so we have to educate the users about how this technology works from the ground up.
right.
So bringing this tech to the market required this coordinated effort among many teams, and
Right.
it's something that we still work on to perfect further.
For sure, yeah, no, and I think that's a problem a lot of AI companies are running into right now, where the tech is one thing, that's its own issue, but educating the end customer about the technology and making them comfortable with it is such a big problem, and that's where product and design and marketing step in to really steer that, and that's where I think products can be so important, because it's not about only the technology; it's about the end customer actually understanding the technology and wanting to use it and adopt it.
Yeah, exactly. Like even if you think about this Chat GPT thing, right? It's the technology itself is not new. It is available and was available before OpenAI had this GPT-3 API available, and not its GPT-3. That means that there were GPT-1 and 2, but nobody seemed to notice or uh, explore it further. And what the only thing that they changed is they added this UX layer that you can talk with it, right? They made it conversational, and boom, it went viral. So the UX and this how you teach people to use the tech and
Mhm.
approach it is very important, especially for these new technologies in AI.
For sure, and I think it's too underrated in our industry. I think people focus way too much on the tech, and that's one of the reasons I see a bunch of startups in AI or in general fail because they focus so much on technology and not on the end use case. So that's big kudos to you and the team, and I hope that the adoption rate is keeps going up. So and more people take on the technology, and I think that actually leads to my next question, which is retention is such a key area in any product being successful. And with Krisp, like I had that magic moment with Krisp, but what keeps me onto the platform? That's such an important question for the product team to answer, and for teams across the company to answer. So I was just wondering for the team at Krisp, what are some ways you and the team have worked around making sure that your users keep on the platform and they want to keep using Krisp?
Yeah, great question. So maybe I would give the context about why it was challenging, right? Especially for a product like Crisp. So the general first I want to give big kudos to Reforge, because the first thing that we did with a team when we started to think about growth and retention and acquisition and how to stick everything together is we went full Reforge, and that's where our funnels became loops and we it kind of elevated our thinking a lot. And the core idea, one important idea that we learned from that is that, like, if you want to keep people using your platform, you have to continuously show the value, right? You have to continue, especially if it's a SaaS offering, like it's a subscription. You have to, if you don't show the value continuously, then they will not use it anymore, and then and they'll churn. So it's a problem, right? So the core idea is to you have to show value consistently, not one time, but consistently. And when we started thinking about it in Crisp context, well, there were uh, a lot of problems. First, we want to show the value, but hey, Crisp is an audio product. The value is not shown; it's kind of heard, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing, and the thing gets worse because it's not something that you hear as a Crisp user, but it's something that others
Yeah.
uh, here, and not even not here but actually not here. Because the
That's right.
value because the value that Crisp adds to the conversation is something that we remove audibly for the other side. So the challenge then is, how do you show it to the Crisp user so that they can continuously see the value and continuously use the product, right?
Mhm.
uh, and do that and do that knowingly, because like that was the other part of the challenge of doing this exercise at Crisp, because Crisp is very invisible. You set it
Mhm.
up and it just works.
Yeah.
It works every time, it works for every call. It doesn't take too much attention to itself. And we had this valid question, even for those users who do use Crisp, are they even aware of it? Or
Yeah.
no, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the problem and the challenge that we had. Uh, and big kudos to the growth team headed by Asti Pili, who was thinking about different ways of how to approach this problem, how to solve it. And actually, we found a solution to this in the habit, in the psychology of this habit formation. Maybe I think everybody pretty familiar with this concept of habit loop, right? Like how you
Mhm.
form habits. It starts with a trigger, then the trigger gets you to do some action, and it ends with a reward. So, and if the reward was good enough and satisfying enough, next time you see the trigger, you will do the action, right? And then the loop repeats itself. So, um, we had the trigger, that is the call. We had the action, that is using Crisp. We were missing the reward. And
Right.
so we came up with the idea of, show at the end of the call to show this brief call summary screen that would visually show the total noise and echo that was removed, right, from
Right.
the call. It's a very simple concept. It's nothing groundbreaking about it if you think about it, right? It's simple, pop-up notification, but it made wonders for us in terms of retention, and also impacting the monetization, because people now were able to quantify, visibly and quantifiably the amount of value that Chris brought to their calls, or like the amount of noise that was removed and the intensity of it. And so they were more motivated and more aware of the value, so they're
Right.
more likely to pay for it, and they're more likely to use it continuously because they're able to see it.
Right.
uh, so yeah, like that's how we approach this. And I think that was the we at the team were very excited about it, because that was an interesting way, maybe non-traditional, because I doubt that there are other products that had the similar kind of tricky problem that we had,
Right.
of showing something that others don't hear. But yeah, that's where we are.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's such an interesting problem. Like, how do you show for a product that's supposed to be invisible and supposed to be seamless and just like working in the background, how do you show that value? How do you deliver that value? And it's a fun problem, it's
Yeah.
very cool to see the way your team approached it and what the ultimate solution was and the benefits of that, right? And I think I knew you were going to get to that where you're showing that value because I see it in my own use of Krisp. And that's one of the reasons why I respect the product so much is because you're showing that value to me, and I'm constantly reminded about what Krisp has done for me. Um, and I think so many great companies do that so well, and yeah, that's such a unique way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I still think that we have some place to improve it in
Hmm.
terms of showing the impact that Crisp has better, and more probably like real time. Uh, but yeah, software is never done, right?
Yeah.
And we will keep improving it.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. No, super excited, and I'm sure with more people joining the team and just your and some of the additions in AI, Krisp will only get better. So super excited to see the future of Krisp, and thank you so much for going through that. And while I have you on the podcast, moving a little bit moving away from specifically Krisp, you're one of the product leaders in the industry, and so I wanted to get your thoughts in terms of leading a product team, and in general, like when you are leading a team of product managers, what is the core team principles that you look for when it comes to your current product managers or a new product manager coming onto a team?
yeah. Well, uh, first, I think finding product managers is hard.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe because the role is somehow loosely defined, and each company would define it in their own way, and so it's different. So it's difficult to find uh, the persona that fits exactly your definition, right? That would fit exactly your company with the values and the dynamics, and the specific mojo that you have in a team. Uh, but yeah, for Crisp, I think there are several things. First is we want people with intelligence. Maybe this might sound trivial, but we discovered that it's really not, because there are a lot of frameworks, there are these books, etc., and people can really know those well. But product management is very practical discipline, and you'll find that it's not really about copying some framework from somewhere, I don't know, getting Spotify squats or something like
Right.
that and bringing it, implementing it at your end. You always need to do some additional thinking about if it makes sense, or if
Right.
it's valuable, or if this is valuable, or if it's valuable to do now. So this requires a lot of this raw intellectual horsepower, and we respect that a lot. One of the values that we have at Crisp is that the best arguments win, uh, and like no matter whose argument is this, the challenge is that you have to bring those arguments and communicate them well. So even with the example of call summary, right, that I've mentioned before, we had this idea for quite some time, maybe from the first day that we released Crisp. What we were lacking is this good arguments that would, prove that, hey, you have to do exactly this and not something else.
Right.
So one thing that we're looking for is this intelligence and analytics, but also balanced with deep user empathy and ability to see the problem from many different angles, so that we, whenever we make decision or decide something important about the future, we are able to really see it from other angles and be the voice of those people who are not in the room at the time. That only comes with empathy, and that's also the other thing that we're looking out for. And the third one is, it doesn't matter how good your arguments are or how deep of an empathy you have if you're not able to communicate it effectively.
Right.
The third and maybe core important part of it is that the product manager, especially the product manager, because the product manager are working like as an organizational glue, right? They're working with everybody, and kind of acting as the one that's not in a room. So it's important to empathize and communicate well, both internally and externally, both orally and in writing.
Right.
We're especially given the global nature of our team, that some of the team members are in the US, some of them in Europe, some of them in Armenia, and a lot of communication is happening asynchronously over Slack in a written form. So it's important to be able to formulate and write concisely and well, and also talk concisely and well.
Right.
So yeah, and that obviously goes on top of everything else that a product manager should be able to do. Write stories, work with a team, do user research, etc. But we believe that those three foundational blocks are important, are the core precondition for success
Right.
at Crisp. So
Right. That makes sense, and I think it's really hard to find people who are who are great at all three, which is the fundamental problem with great product managers, right? Trying
yeah,
to find them.
that's why it's difficult to find them, right?
Exactly. Especially like, people, I feel like people who have a lot of intelligence or like getting really technical, they'll lack some of that user empathy component, or people who are super business focused and just focus on the business use case won't necessarily look at the feasibility of the of a business of a technical condition. So it's such an interesting problem even there in the hiring problem and the trying to find the best product manager problem. And yeah, like it's always interesting to see how everybody has their own sort of solution to this. And I think it narrows down to some degree in terms of each individual person, but the three things that do stay pretty consistent are those three elements that you mentioned there: the deep user empathy, the being highly skilled in terms of technical knowledge, and then being able to communicate. And yeah,
And
even with other.
show it. I can share one example
Right.
about how I got into Crisp.
Mhm.
So I saw the vacancy, and obviously I sent my CV, and I thought I could send the accompanying cover letter, like as expected, right, from a classic job application. But I thought, like, hey, this is an audio company and they say that they remove noise. Why don't I make a cover letter in the form of a audio file? So I went to somewhere noisy and I recorded myself in this noisy place saying, "Hey, I want to join this company. I know that its recording is noisy, but you're so great with noise cancellation that I believe that you'll remove the noise and understand what I'm saying." So, so that what I wanted to do with this is like, hey, showing that I'm kind of creative, right?
Right.
But it's one way to write in a CV, hey, I'm creative, and the other way is actually, showing it in
Right.
something that is very visible and understandable.
Hmm.
And that's kind of a thing that we expect from the team as well, like show me, don't tell me, and bring all the supporting evidence with it.
Right. And I think that passion for the product is so important, and you're displaying you displayed that with that unique cover letter there. It's funny though, because on a little bit of a side note, nowadays, with cover letters, I just see people going on Chat GPT and just throwing cover letters in there now. But no, that's a super unique cover letter and a really interesting story there. But yeah, so one thing you mentioned there is how your team spread out between the U.S., Europe, and specifically Armenia. And I'm not gonna lie, like before I got to know about Krisp, I didn't know Krisp was Armenian based, and a lot of the team is based out of Armenia, and the more I dug into the Armenian tech scene to get prepared for this interview, I realized that wow, okay, the Armenian tech scene is actually booming a lot. And it was a country that I didn't have that much perspective on. I just didn't know as much. So what excites you about the Armenian tech scene, and why do you think the Armenian tech scene is now ready to compete with the rest of the world? Because you guys have some great products coming out.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the cool parts about working at Crisp, and like realizing that it's sort of like an Armenian product, and even knowing that because Armenia is a tiny country somewhere there that not many people have heard about. So it's really great to know that. Our work also helps with spreading a word about the country. So yeah, Armenia is a post-Soviet. In a past, Armenia was part of a Soviet Union,
Mhm.
and back in the day, it was kind of the Silicon Valley of the Soviet Union, because a lot of this high tech, computers, etc., were developed here, and
Mhm.
there is this strong school of fundamental sciences of math and physics, etc. Uh, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it turns out that there is this school, and there are so many talented scientists and engineers, um, that served as the foundation of this new wave, right, after the Soviet Union and independent Armenia. So that kind of this knowledge that passed on served as the basis. That's why we have great engineering and research and science talent available here. What we were lacking is this marketing and product skills, because the Soviets were not great at it, and it was not the place to be good at, right?
Right.
So that's where we were lacking, but thankfully, but well, first the government recognized the IT as the priority sector of the economy, and they're aiding it with tax breaks and a lot of tax reduction, with helping establish IT companies. Everything is done online, and
Mhm.
there are significant tax advantages, technoparks, etc. So all this infrastructure to help. There is also a huge Armenian diaspora spread around the world that is kind of helping with expertise, with money, and like this bringing this knowledge that we're lacking, and put it on top of the engineering that's
Right.
already there. And I think slowly but surely we're getting there when we get this healthy mix of engineering talent and the product and marketing, this business acumen,
Mhm.
in order to compete on a global scene. And we have some great success stories now. A lot of startups coming up, and the biggest one probably is Pixar, that's been valued. That's a unicorn. That like the first
Yeah.
Armenian unicorn, the photo editing app. That again was started here and then spread worldwide. So yeah, now the tech scene of Armenia is booming, and there are a lot of new companies establishing. And yeah, we're hopefully looking into the bright future.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's super exciting. I think alongside Armenia, just in general, the globalization of products has been such an interesting phenomena to watch. Because even as soon as 10 years ago, a lot of times the external countries were just used as support teams for the U.S. based corporations. But in the last 10 years, you've seen so many countries just pop up and make actually make their own products and make their own companies that they're bringing to a global stage. And you mentioned Pixar there, of course. Krisp is one of them. But even like countries like for example, like Israel or India, they have a bunch of new unicorns coming out. So it's just been so interesting to see the globalization there. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to see the next big companies come from Armenia, alongside, of course, the ones that are already doing so well.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I think that's the power of internet, right? And the power of technology, that the barrier to entry is very low, and the only thing that you need is a brain and a vision and the courage to get coupled with
Yeah, and,
persistence to go and make it happen.
and at least a Raspberry Pi level computer so you can get some code down.
Yeah.
um, but no, perfect. It was so great having you on the podcast. And the two last questions I have before I let you go is: first, is there a book that you recommend us checking out?
A book. Um, there are many books, along with the standard ones that everybody recommends, some non-standard ones, but I don't know, nothing that pops up. I think probably like Good to Great is a good book, because it has this healthy mix of stories and theory behind them. uh, and Innovator's Dilemma. It's difficult to read because it's very academic, like from my experience. But I think it's also very to the point, and makes this the point that they're making is very clear and very actionable. That you can put the book aside, look at your product or like company and organization, see what you were not seeing before, and take an immediate action.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I haven't heard about Good to Great, but I know The Innovator's Dilemma is on my bookshelf, and I'm still getting around to it. I get sidetracked. I should be reading a lot more, but I get sidetracked, and yeah, I got to make reading a priority. But I'll slowly get there. I'll get to that book as well. um, but perfect. Yeah, I guess. So the last question I have is, what are the next steps for you and Chris? What can we look forward to?
Oh, yeah, we're cooking a lot of interesting things out there. So I think something that we can call Crisp 2.0
Mhm.
is coming in a near future. I won't tell you what it is, but I will tell you that it's an exciting project, and an exciting evolution on top of what we already have. So yeah, uh, we're cooking it now, and very soon we will have a chance to release it. So yeah, uh, that's the thing.
Perfect. Perfect. Well,
And,
I'm really excited. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I mean, maybe I didn't tell as much as you would expect me to, but
That's
my main point is, uh, keep updated, keep in touch, and good things will come are coming.
For sure. No, I'm excited to cancel more noises with Krisp 2.0 and perhaps do some other stuff as well. So looking forward to that coming out. And of course, if you guys want to follow the journey, feel free to follow Karapet on LinkedIn or follow Krisp on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever Krisp is available. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for listening in, and thank you so much for coming onto the podcast once again.